Not today! I warned you! Sierra Hawk.
I still remember the night the wind changed, as if the land itself had sensed trouble riding in from the dark hills. The prairie was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you listen harder. Lantern light flickered in a few scattered windows, cattle settled in their pens, and the dirt road lay empty beneath a silver moon. It looked like any other peaceful frontier evening in the old American West. But peace can be fragile, and that night it was about to shatter near a lonely cabin at the edge of town. The cabin belonged to a widow named Sierra Hawk. Folks in town spoke her name with respect, though not everyone knew why. To most, she was a quiet woman who kept to herself, tending her small garden and repairing her fence when it leaned too far into the wind. She wore simple dresses, carried her water pail at sunrise, and greeted neighbors with a polite nod. Yet there was something steady in her eyes, something that made people lower their voices without knowing why. Some said she had endured more than her fair share of hardship. Others claimed she had once traveled far beyond these plains. No one truly knew her full story. What the townsfolk did not know was that the name Sierra Hawk carried weight beyond the valley. In distant places, whispered stories spoke of a skilled tracker who moved like shadow and thought like thunder. They said this figure stood firm when others fled, that danger seemed to lose its courage in her presence. The truth was hidden beneath layers of quiet living, tucked away like a weapon wrapped in cloth. Sierra had chosen peace, or at least she had tried to, believed that the land deserved calm evenings and soft mornings, but the past has a way of finding those who try to outrun it. On that particular night, 3 riders approached from the North Ridge. They kept their horses low and their torches unlit. Their coats were dark, hats pulled down to shade their faces. They were outlaws, though they preferred to call themselves fortune seekers. They had heard rumors about a widow living alone with a modest cabin and no family nearby. They believed she would be easy to intimidate. They imagined quick hands, a few stolen goods, and a silent escape before dawn. They did not know that courage sometimes lives where least expected. The leader of the trio was a tall man named Gideon Vale. His voice carried confidence, and his steps never seemed to hurry. With him rode Dalton Crow, quick and restless, always scanning the horizon. The third was Calder Boone, younger than the others, with eyes that shifted uneasily in the moonlight. They had planned their move carefully, studying the cabin from a distance for 2 days. They believed the widow was alone, vulnerable, and unaware of their presence. From the outside, Sierra's cabin looked ordinary. Smoke curled gently from the chimney. A rocking chair rested on the porch. The shutters were closed against the night breeze. Inside, a single lamp burned on a wooden table, casting a warm glow across the room. Sierra stood by the window, her reflection faint in the glass. She had noticed the riders long before they reached the ridge. Years of experience had sharpened her senses. The way the horses moved, the silence between hoofbeats, the unnatural stillness of the air, all of it told her something was wrong. She did not panic. Instead, she placed the lamp on the table and walked toward a wall where an old rifle rested above the doorframe. Her movements were calm, deliberate. She did not reach for it immediately. First she listened. The floorboards creaked outside. A soft whisper passed between men who believed themselves hidden. Sierra's heart beat steady, not in fear, but in focus. She had left behind the life that required such readiness, yet readiness had never left her. Outside, Gideon signaled the others. They would approach quietly, break the lock, gather what they could, and disappear before anyone stirred. Dalton adjusted his gloves, eager for action. Calder hesitated for just a second, glancing back toward the dark hills as though sensing that the cabin held more than timber and nails. But greed moved them forward. When they reached the porch, the wind shifted again. The rocking chair moved slightly, tapping against the boards. Gideon frowned, but dismissed it as a trick of air. He stepped toward the door and reached for the handle. It was locked, as expected. Dalton moved to the side window, preparing to pry it open. Calder stayed near the steps, scanning the surrounding field. Inside the cabin, Sierra positioned herself beside the door, standing in the shadow of the wall. She did not speak. She did not rush. Her training had taught her patience. The men outside believed they controlled the night, yet they were stepping into a story they did not understand. Sierra's identity as the famous Sierra Hawk was something she had buried deep, but tonight it felt closer to the surface, like a storm gathering strength. Gideon struck the door with his shoulder. The wood shuddered, but held firm. Dalton cursed under his breath and reached for a tool from his belt. Calder suddenly froze. He had spotted something unusual in the dirt near the porch steps, a faint mark that did not match the surrounding tracks. It looked recent, deliberate. Before he could warn the others, a sound echoed from inside the cabin, the gentle click of a hammer being drawn back. The outlaws paused. The night grew heavier. Shadow shifted behind the window curtain. Gideon narrowed his eyes, realizing for the first time that the cabin was not as empty as they believed. Dalton stepped back from the window, heart beginning to race. Calder swallowed hard, gripping the railing as uncertainty replaced confidence. From within, a calm voice spoke through the wooden door. It was steady, neither loud nor fearful. The words were simple, yet they carried authority that made the men still. The voice did not beg, it did not threaten, it simply announced presence. The name Sierra Hawk had never meant anything to them until that moment. The realization began to settle in, slow and undeniable. The widow they planned to frighten might not be a widow at all, and the cabin they expected to rob might hold a legend. The wind swept across the porch again, lifting dust into the air. Gideon tightened his grip, struggling to maintain control of the situation. Dalton glanced toward the dark fields, suddenly wishing for daylight. Calder felt his confidence crumble as the door creaked slightly from the inside. Inside the cabin, Sierra remained steady, her hand resting near the rifle, but not yet lifting it. She did not want violence. She wanted these men to understand the line they were about to cross. Her eyes reflected the lamplight, sharp and unwavering. She had faced challenges before, far greater than 3 men at her doorstep, yet this moment felt different. It was not only about defense, it was about revealing truth. The porch boards creaked again as someone moved closer to the door. The lock rattled under pressure. Sierra took a slow breath and prepared herself, not knowing whether the night would end in conversation or confrontation. The moonlight shifted behind passing clouds, casting the cabin into deeper shadow. Outside, Gideon raised his hand, ready to act. Inside, Sierra Hawk stood ready as well, though the men had yet to see her face. The silence stretched thin, like a rope pulled between 2 forces. One step, one word, one sudden movement could change everything. And in that fragile moment before the door gave way, before identities were revealed and choices made, the cabin held its breath. The sound at the door did not break the night. It only deepened it. Inside the cabin, Sierra Hawk kept her place in the shadows, listening to the slow rhythm of boots shifting on the porch. She did not move yet. She had learned long ago that patience could be stronger than fear. The lamp behind her cast a soft glow across the wooden walls, and in that warm light, the cabin felt almost like a memory of safety rather than a home under threat. Years earlier, before she chose this quiet life, Sierra had traveled with a small group across the frontier. She'd learned how to read trails in dry earth, how to sense danger in the stillness of men who spoke too loudly. Back then, her name had been spoken in places far from this valley. Some feared it. Others admired it, but Sierra never sought fame. She only wanted freedom, and perhaps a place where the past would stop chasing her. When she found this cabin, she believed she had finally stepped out of the storm. The town nearby had accepted her slowly. She kept her distance, but never showed hostility. When a fence needed repair, she fixed it herself. When a child once lost a horse near her land, she helped search without asking for reward. That quiet kindness built trust. People began to see her as a strong widow who endured hardship with dignity. They never guessed the depth of her training or the reasons she stayed alert even on peaceful mornings. Outside, Gideon Vale remained steady on the porch. His confidence was built on years of commanding others who were weaker in spirit. He believed most people folded under pressure. In his mind, this cabin held easy gain. Dalton Crow, always eager to prove himself, leaned closer to the window, trying to catch a glimpse inside. Calder Boone stayed near the steps, his unease growing. He had joined the group only months ago, drawn by promises of quick wealth. He had not expected the silence here to feel so heavy. The wind moved across the plains again, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. It brushed against the cabin walls, making the lantern flame flicker. Sierra noticed every detail. She remembered how the land could signal change long before it arrived. The prairie never lied. It only whispered. From her place near the wall, she thought about the path that led her here. After years of movement, she had met a man once who spoke gently and looked at her without fear. He had admired her strength, not her reputation. Their time together had been brief, shaped by circumstance and distance. He had encouraged her to choose peace when she could. Though that chapter ended, the memory remained close to her heart, reminding her that strength and tenderness could live in the same soul. It was that belief that guided her now. The outlaws did not know these things. They saw only a cabin, a widow, and the promise of supplies. They had heard rumors that she lived alone since her husband passed, though the truth of that loss was private and personal. Sierra had loved deeply. The grief had shaped her but did not weaken her. Instead, it sharpened her sense of responsibility. She would not allow strangers to tear through her home or threaten the quiet she had built. Gideon raised his fist again, signaling Dalton to prepare the window. Dalton moved carefully, placing his tool against the wooden frame. The sound of metal touching wood carried clearly through the silence. Inside, Sierra shifted slightly, positioning herself where the door could be controlled if it opened. She did not aim the rifle yet. She wanted them to make the first mistake. Calder glanced toward the road, noticing faint movement in the distance. It might have been only shadows, but something about it unsettled him. He wondered if someone in town had noticed the riders earlier. The valley was not empty, and news traveled quickly. Still, Gideon's determination held the group together. He trusted numbers and speed. Within the cabin, Sierra thought of the future she hoped to protect. She imagined planting new flowers in spring, watching the sunrise without tension in her shoulders. She dreamed of a life where romance could grow naturally, without fear of interruption. She had once believed that such dreams required leaving behind her strength, but she now understood that strength was part of love. A person could stand firm and still have a tender heart. A sudden knock struck the door, firm and deliberate. Gideon decided to test the response before forcing entry. The knock was not friendly. It carried demand. Sierra did not answer immediately. She let the silence stretch, making them question their control. Dalton shifted his weight nervously. Calder felt the air tighten. The porch creaked once more as someone stepped closer. Sierra's eyes moved toward the sound. She remembered every inch of the cabin layout, every board that might groan under pressure. She had prepared for many possibilities when she first moved here, though she had hoped never to use those plans. The men outside began to whisper among themselves. Their earlier confidence had changed into uncertainty. They realized the cabin was not reacting like an easy target. There were no screams, no frantic footsteps, only calm presence. That calm could mean danger. Inside, Sierra thought about the identity she had hidden. She had not used the name Sierra Hawk openly in years. She believed the past belonged in distant towns and dusty memories. Yet tonight, she sensed that her old life and her new one were about to meet. She felt neither regret nor excitement, only readiness. The lamp flickered again as a stronger gust struck the chimney. The sound echoed through the room. Sierra moved slightly closer to the door, her posture steady. Her hand hovered near the rifle, but she still did not lift it. She wanted to know how far these men intended to go. Outside, Gideon placed his hand on the door once more. He pressed gently, testing the lock. The wood resisted. Dalton waited for instruction, breathing unevenly. Calder's eyes darted between the cabin and the dark horizon. None of them spoke now. The valley around them seemed to hold its breath as well. Surrounding hills stood silent under the moonlight, and the path leading to the cabin remained empty. Yet tension traveled across the land like a living thing. Sierra listened carefully, her mind calculating. She knew that once the door opened, everything would change. She was prepared to defend her home, but she also understood that revealing her identity would alter her relationship with the town, and perhaps with the wider world beyond it. The balance between secrecy and truth hung in delicate form. The outlaws had come seeking opportunity. Instead, they found resistance in the quiet of a widow's cabin. Their plans were no longer simple. Something inside that wooden structure carried history, strength, and mystery. And though they did not yet understand it fully, They sensed that the night had shifted in ways they could not control. The door remained closed, but the pressure against it increased. Sierra steadied her breath, ready for whatever came next, knowing that the line between silence and confrontation was thinning with every passing. Second, the pressure on the door increased, but it still did not give. Sierra Hawk could hear the frustration in the breathing outside. That sound told her more than any words could. Men who were certain of victory did not breathe like that. She stayed silent, letting the moment stretch until it felt heavier than the wooden walls around her. Gideon Vale stepped back from the door and looked at his companions. His pride did not allow doubt, yet doubt had already entered his mind. He had expected fear, maybe even pleading. Instead, he faced calm resistance. He motioned for Dalton Crow to try the window again. Dalton obeyed, though his hands were no longer steady. Calder Boone remained near the steps, watching the field and the road, feeling a strange discomfort he could not explain. Inside the cabin, Sierra considered her next move. She did not want this to become a violent night. Her goal had always been protection, not conflict. She remembered the town's trust, the neighbors who depended on quiet mornings and safe streets. If gunfire echoed across the valley, rumors would spread quickly. The frontier was built on reputation, and reputation traveled faster than horses. She needed to control the situation without losing herself in it. Dalton finally managed to pry the window open a small amount. The wood groaned softly. That sound reached Sierra's ears. She moved away from the door and positioned herself closer to the sidewall, where she had better cover. She did not rush. Her movements were smooth, shaped by discipline rather than panic. Years ago, during her travels, she had learned that haste often revealed weakness. Gideon leaned toward the window opening. A faint beam of moonlight slipped inside, touching the floorboards. For a brief moment, he saw the outline of furniture in the warm glow of the lamp. No one appeared to be moving. That puzzled him. If the widow was truly alone, why did the cabin feel occupied by more than silence? Calder stepped closer and whispered that perhaps they should reconsider. His voice was low but firm. He did not enjoy the feeling that settled in his chest. He had joined this group for survival, not for confrontation with someone unknown. Yet Gideon dismissed his concern with a sharp glance. Pride was driving the leader forward, and retreat was not part of his plan. Inside, Sierra heard fragments of their conversation. She could not hear every word, but she sensed the shift in energy. This was no longer a simple break-in. It had become a test of will. She thought about revealing herself, about stepping into the light and ending their uncertainty. But she chose patience instead. She would allow them to reveal their intentions fully before she acted. The cabin's quiet strength reminded her of why she had chosen this place. The valley surrounding it was peaceful, with open skies and wide fields that turned gold at sunset. She had fallen in love with the land before she ever unpacked her belongings. That love had grown with each season. It was here that she felt closest to the life she wanted, a life built on dignity and genuine connection. Even the thought of romance felt possible again, though she had guarded her heart carefully. Outside, Dalton tried once more to push the window open further. The frame resisted. He cursed softly, then reached for his tool again. As he worked, a sudden sound came from within the cabin, the slow movement of a chair shifting across the floor. The sound was subtle, but deliberate. It reached the men clearly. All three froze. Gideon's confidence wavered for a second. It underestimated this widow. The cabin was not empty. Someone was inside, moving with awareness. He signaled for silence and stepped back from the window. Calder felt relief at the pause, though it was mixed with fear of what might come next. Inside, Sierra adjusted the position of the lamp. She wanted the light to remain steady. She placed it behind a wooden post so that anyone peering in would struggle to see clearly. The glow would reveal little about her exact location. She prepared herself to speak if necessary. Words could sometimes carry more authority than force. The tension between the two sides now felt personal. It was no longer about supplies or rumors. It had become a confrontation between experience and arrogance, between quiet strength and reckless ambition. Sierra understood this dynamic well. She had faced it before in other towns where strangers misjudged those who chose silence. Calder finally spoke up again, suggesting that they withdraw and return another night with more preparation. He argued that the cabin might belong to someone connected to town leadership, or perhaps to a skilled frontiersman. Gideon did not like the suggestion, but he could see that his men were unsettled. If he forced them forward now, loyalty might weaken. Sierra listened carefully. She was learning their tone, their hierarchy, and their fears. Information was power, and she gathered it quietly. She also thought about the possibility that this confrontation could reach beyond her cabin. If these men felt humiliated, they might spread stories that would bring others. The conflict could expand if not handled carefully. The wind rose again, sweeping dust across the porch. A loose board struck the railing, creating a sharp sound. All three men reacted instinctively, turning toward the noise. That moment of distraction was brief, but revealing. They were not fully in control. The night itself seemed to stand against them. Inside, Sierra moved closer to the door once more. She did not raise her voice yet. She wanted them to understand that she was aware of every action. The cabin was her territory, and she would defend it if necessary. But she also hoped for resolution without bloodshed. Her strength was not meant to destroy, only to protect. Gideon tightened his jaw and reached for the door handle again. His pride pushed him to continue. Dalton waited behind him, unsure whether to prepare for entry or retreat. Calder's eyes flicked toward the hills one more time. He felt that this night would mark a turning point, though he did not know in which direction. Within the cabin, Sierra Hawk stood steady, her heart calm but alert. She knew that once the next decision was made, there would be no returning to simple assumptions. The outlaws had come, believing they understood the widow inside. Now they were beginning to suspect that the story was far more complex. The lock rattled slightly under pressure. The door trembled, but remained firm. Sierra placed her hand firmly on the inside handle, ready to respond. The lamp behind her cast long shadows across the floor. The air felt tight, filled with unspoken intentions. Outside, Gideon gave a final look to his companions. Whatever happened next would shape their future. And inside the cabin, Sierra waited, fully aware that the line between patience and action was growing thin with every passing heartbeat. The night had grown heavier, almost as if the stars themselves had held their breath. Sierra Hawk could hear the shifting of the men outside, each step careful but impatient. Her cabin felt smaller, yet stronger, as though the wooden walls had absorbed every moment of her life and now lent her courage. She did not flinch. Every sound, every creak, every whisper of wind carried meaning. Years of living on the edge of danger had honed her senses to a sharpness no ordinary widow could possess. Gideon Vale finally spoke, his voice low and measured. He had realized that hesitation could be more dangerous than confrontation. "Sir Hawk," he called, using the name he had only recently learned from whispers among local folk. "We don't want trouble, but we know you're armed and skilled. We're only looking for supplies, nothing more." Sierra remained silent. The name echoed in the cabin, but she did not acknowledge it. Silence, she knew, could be more powerful than words. The outlaws outside did not fully understand her strength or her history. She had survived ambushes, crossed deserts alone, and faced men twice their size without fear. That experience had been forged in fire and loss, tempered by discipline, and now it guided every breath she took. Dalton Crow shifted nervously behind Gideon, glancing toward the hills as if escape might present itself. Calder Boone gripped the railing of the porch, feeling sweat prickling at his brow. He had never been in a situation like this, and his mind raced with what-ifs. Gideon's calm exterior could not mask the tension that ran through his group. They were outsiders in a land that did not forgive ignorance. Inside, Sierra's thoughts wandered briefly to the life she had hoped to build. The quiet cabin, the gentle wind through the trees, the taste of freedom at Donnet had been her dream for years.
Hi.
And sometimes, late at night, she allowed herself to imagine another kind of life too. A life where love was not danger, where her heart could trust another without fear of loss. She remembered the man she had met long ago, whose gentle words had shown her that tenderness could coexist with strength. The memory gave her a subtle warmth, a reminder that even amid this tension, life held possibility. The wind picked up suddenly, rustling the surrounding grass and sending dust swirling across the porch. It carried the faint scent of sage, dry earth, and something distant, almost like smoke from a far-off fire. The natural sounds made the outlaws more restless. Gideon raised his hand, signaling Dalton and Calder to pause. He sensed the shift, but did not fully understand it. Something about this place, about Sierra Hawk, unsettled him in a way he could not name. Inside, Sierra moved with quiet precision. She adjusted the lamp so that the shadows shifted, creating an illusion of presence in multiple corners. Her hand hovered near the rifle, but she did not lift it. Instead, she listened. Every creak of the porch, every whispered conversation, every hesitant movement was a story of its own. She could almost anticipate their next steps. Suddenly, a loose shutter banged against the cabin wall. The noise made Dalton jump. Calder cursed under his breath. Gideon froze, realizing the night had taken a life of its own. Sierra remained unmoved. The small, deliberate noise was nothing to hurt, was merely part of the rhythm of life she had learned to read and control. Yet she knew the men outside were starting to see the unpredictability of her domain. Gideon took a deep breath. He had faced many risks, but none felt like this. It believed in the certainty of planning and the predictability of greed-driven men. But Sierra Hawk was neither predictable nor simple. He realized that the balance of power had shifted. The widow he thought would bend under pressure was the one who held it now. Dalton tried the window again, pressing the tool against the frame. The wood groaned but held firm. Calder glanced toward the distant hills, scanning for movement, and for a moment he imagined the townsfolk coming to the cabin's aid. The thought brought a flicker of hope, but also fear if they arrived too late. The confrontation could turn deadly. Sierra shifted to the side of the door, her hand brushing against the rifle's stock. She was calm, her heart steady, but the tension inside her chest was sharp, like a drawn bowstring. Every second counted. She thought about how easily one misstep could turn into a tragedy, yet she also knew that courage, patience, and clarity were weapons as strong as steel. Gideon finally spoke again, his tone sharper this time. "We don't want to hurt anyone, but we won't leave empty-handed. Step out, Sierra Hawk, and no one needs to get hurt." His words were meant to assert control, but the hesitation in his eyes betrayed doubt. He did not yet understand the magnitude of the widow's skill or the depth of her resolve. Inside, Sierra's mind moved to the next stage. She had considered every scenario for survival, but she also considered the possibility of turning this confrontation into understanding. If they saw her not as an enemy, but as someone who commanded respect, perhaps the night could end without violence. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. She remembered the warmth of the man she had loved, the patience in his eyes, and she felt a quiet strength rising within her. The wind swept across the porch once more, rattling the lamp and sending small shadows dancing across the cabin floor. Gideon glanced at Dalton and Calder, their expressions tight with fear and anticipation. They were beginning to sense that this night would demand more than courage. It would demand respect for someone they had underestimated. Dalton's hand shook slightly as he adjusted the tool. Calder felt a cold sweat across his neck. Gideon tried to keep his posture firm, but he realized that the widow inside had the advantage. Every sound she made, every stillness she maintained, was a signal that she was prepared for what might come next. Sierra took one last look at the lamp, at the shadows it cast, and then at the door. She was ready to reveal herself, but she did not yet. She wanted the moment to stretch, to let the outlaws feel the weight of their choices. The tension had built like a storm on the horizon. One movement, one sound, one word could change everything. Outside, Gideon motioned for Dalton to approach the door. Calder hesitated, but fear and loyalty pushed him forward. Their footsteps were careful, deliberate, but the uncertainty between them was palpable. The night seemed alive, as if every star and shadow was watching the unfolding drama. Sierra's hand remained near the rifle. Her eyes were sharp, her senses heightened. The room was quiet, but in that quiet, every sound outside was magnified. She could feel the storm about to break. a tension that would soon demand resolution. Yet she also felt a strange thrill, the anticipation of confrontation, the awareness of her own power, and the subtle hope that the night could end in more than survival. The door handle rattled once more. The pressure outside increased. Gideon's breath was steady but hard. Dalton's hands were trembling, Calder's eyes wide, and inside, Sierra Hawk stood ready, calm yet alert, aware that the moment of truth was just a heartbeat away. The valley, the stars, the wind, they all waited with her. And in that silence, the story teetered on the edge of revelation, danger, and the possibility of something more profound. Love awakened, and respect earned under the vast night sky. The door rattled one final time, and then everything became still. Sierra Hawk did not rush. She did not speak. She simply waited, listening to the breathing outside slow down. The silence felt different now, not heavy with threat, but filled with decision. Gideon Vale lowered his hands slowly, realizing that forcing the door would only lead to regret. For the first time since arriving at the cabin, he truly looked at the situation instead of his pride. Inside, Sierra stepped closer to the door and spoke in a calm, steady voice. She did not shout. She did not threaten. She told them that she did not want trouble, but she would protect her home. Her words carried strength without anger. Dalton Crow felt the weight of her tone. It was not the voice of a frightened widow. It was the voice of someone who had survived hardship and chosen peace. Calder Boone finally spoke up, admitting that they had made a mistake. His voice was honest and shaken. He explained that they had believed the cabin was empty and that they were desperate for supplies after a difficult journey. Gideon listened closely. For the first time, he saw his plan clearly, and it did not look brave. It looked reckless. Sierra kept the rifle at her side, but did not raise it. She asked them to step back from the door and lower their tools. She said she was willing to talk, but only if they respected her space. One by one, the men moved away from the entrance. The porch creaked softly as they retreated to the edge of the light. The tension in the air slowly began to change. When Sierra finally opened the door, she stood tall in the warm glow of the lamp. The men saw her clearly for the first time. She did not appear harsh or angry, appeared steady, confident, and fully aware of her surroundings. Her presence alone was enough to command attention. Gideon removed his hat as a sign of respect. Dalton looked down at the ground. Calder kept his hands visible to show he meant no harm. Sierra spoke calmly about responsibility and consequences. She explained that this land belonged to people who worked hard for it. She reminded them that survival did not require taking from others. Her words were firm but fair. Gideon admitted that they had underestimated her. He also confessed that rumors had made them believe she was an easy target. The misunderstanding had almost led them down a dangerous path. The conversation shifted from conflict to honesty. Sierra asked them about their journey. She learned that they had been traveling for weeks, struggling with food and shelter. Their story did not excuse their actions, but it explained their desperation. Calder's voice trembled as he described the pressure they felt to succeed. Dalton admitted he had followed the group without thinking carefully about the choices. Sierra considered their situation. She believed in accountability, but she also believed in second chances. After a long silence, she made a decision that surprised them all. She told them they could leave peacefully, but only if they promised never to threaten this valley again. She offered them guidance instead of punishment. She said there was honest work in nearby towns if they were willing to seek it. Gideon accepted her terms. He realized that strength was not about forcing others to submit. It was about knowing when to stop. He apologized sincerely for the disturbance and thanked her for not escalating the night. Dalton and Calder followed his lead. Their attitudes had shifted from arrogance to humility. Before they left, Sierra stepped off the porch and looked at the horizon with them. The moonlight bathed the prairie in silver, and the wind felt gentle now. She told them that the frontier could be harsh, but it could also offer renewal. She wished them clarity in their future decisions. The men nodded quietly and mounted their horses. As the riders disappeared down the dirt road, the cabin felt peaceful again. Sierra stood for a moment in the cool air, breathing deeply. The night had tested her resolve, but it had also revealed something important. She was no longer running from her past. She had faced it with dignity and calm control. In the days that followed, news of the encounter spread through the town. People learned that the widow known as Sierra Hawk had handled the situation without harm. Respect for her grew even stronger. Neighbors began to visit more often, offering help with repairs and sharing conversation. The cabin was no longer seen as distant. It became part of the community. Gideon, Dalton, and Calder did not return to a life of trouble. Instead, they found steady work in a neighboring region. Gideon reflected on the night often, remembering how close they had come to making a serious mistake. The experience changed him. He learned that leadership requires wisdom, not just confidence. Sierra continued her quiet life, but it felt different now. She no longer felt the need to hide her strength. She understood that identity and peace could exist together. The name Sierra Hawk was spoken with admiration rather than fear, yet she remained humble, rising each morning to tend her garden and greet the sunrise. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the same man she had once met long ago returned to the valley. He had heard about her courage and wanted to see her again. Their reunion was gentle and sincere. They spoke about the past, about growth, and about the possibility of building a future together. There was no rush, only understanding. Their connection felt natural, grounded in respect and shared values. The cabin, once surrounded by tension, became a place of warmth and conversation. Sierra's romantic heart found space to open again, not because she needed protection, but because she felt safe in her own strength. Love did not replace her independence. It complemented it. The valley remained peaceful. The prairie wind continued to move across the land, but now it carried a sense of harmony rather than fear. The story of the widow who faced outlaws became a reminder in town that assumptions can mislead, and courage can appear in unexpected forms. Sierra Hawk proved that true power does not shout. It stands firm, it listens, it chooses wisely. Outlaws learned that respect is earned, not taken. And the community learned that one person's quiet bravery can protect many. In the end, the cabin was no longer a symbol of vulnerability. It became a symbol of resilience, redemption, and hope in the old American frontier. Sierra's journey showed that even in moments of intense suspense and conflict, understanding can replace fear, and calm strength can lead to a happy ending. The night that began with tension ended with trust. The valley returned to peace. And under the wide sky of the frontier, Sierra Hawk continued her life with confidence, surrounded by respect, love, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.